Welcome to the fourth of the Kaiarahi webinars. We've got a session on scouting of rapids and on how we can use the acronym for scouting rapids to sort of guide us when we're on a meetup. Oh, there's a little bit about me first, sorry. So how did I get into pack rafting? This is a tubing mission on the Otaki many years ago when we didn't carry cameras on the water, so there's not a lot of photos of that. You know, note the health and safety standards, a little bit of kayaking, lots of surfing over the years. Triplets came along and screwed with my life for about 10 years, which sort of canned a lot of outdoor hobbies, a bit of sea kayaking, lots of hunting, fishing, and then into the pack rafting over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So that's a potted history of what I'm about, and then lots of PRANZ committee involvement up until recently, organising lots of trips. So the aim for today's session is to just get everyone capable of coaching a team through a class 2+ or a 3 rapid in a way that empowers individuals to do it themselves. So it's not about showing them how to run a grade 3 rapid. It's about getting them to recognize a grade 3 rapid and realize whether they should be portaging it or paddling it. This is Brendan Nevin and Hugh Miles on the scouting mission for the St Arnaud meetup on one of the rapids there, which can be quite troublesome. So in terms of the scouting types, do you just want to pop in the chat what different types of scouting you can think of? Has anyone got any different styles of scouting and things that they do before they get on the river? So we got boat scouting. Everyone's got lots of boat scouting. So I think one of my favorites is armchair scouting. And armchair scouting is when you're sitting at home looking at pack rafting trips, or you're reading guidebooks like Edgar and Charles and those sorts of things. So that's kind of the level of scouting. You know, you want to be familiar with your runs before you go into them, and you want to know a little bit about them. Google Earth scouting is another one. It's some really great imagery, like the Mohawker when we did that recently. The resolution of the images on there compared to a few years ago is fantastic. Car scouting and track scouting on the walk-in or the drive-in, those are all valuable things, but you know, you can't trust those until you're right on the water looking at it. So armchair, track, boat scout, shore scout, road scout, those are the sorts of things we're looking at there. Extra points if anyone can name the rapid in that photo. Wellington folks especially. So Matt Cowell says Google Earth was pretty amazing for any type of backcountry. Megan says that's toilet bowl. So if you go over the middle there, you get flushed down the middle of the cistern, but otherwise you wash around the rim and go out the other side there. Hugh Cannard says he's paddled it when the water's up at the top of that rock, and that was what it was like on the Hutt Gorge meetup recently where it all got flooded out. So when we're scouting, some of the clues that we can see as we approach a rapid, this is a terrible photo, sorry, because it's just a screen grab from a video, but can you just sort of fire up some suggestions of things that you can see about this rapid that would inform you as to whether to scout? Yeah, noise. I find you can hear a grade 3 rapid because you can't communicate with each other when you're above it. You know, grade 2, it's a bit quiet. Boulder Gardens, Tom Waters, limited visibility of what's ahead. Whitewater rapids. Tony knows there's drops because he's dropped the drops. We're not seeing flat water below. Can't see the bottom. The other thing is these house-sized boulders. They're not house-sized, but they're very big boulders. They'd be a couple of meters high. Big boulders often mean big rapids or big holes underneath rocks. You know, places you might not want to swim. Eddies for eddy hopping. So we can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but down just above the rock in the center, we can actually see Jenny Cozzy sitting in an eddy, just a little red blur down there. So that gives you an idea of scale. What about the tree line? Does the tree line cause any concern?
Dropping away.
It's dropping away really drastically, right? So you know, there could be 3 or 4 meters of drop over the next 50 to 100 meters, which in fact there is. And he can see Tony's just pointing out the flood line where you can see that it's flooded up above those rocks and wiped out the trees. Strainers locked into the rocks, and I think also really steep gorge sides and a lot of trees. So we might be looking at some logs in there, because when a tree falls there, they're massive trees and they're going to have trouble getting through this tight little gut. So that's pretty good. This rapid's called Double Drop on the Hutt Gorge, and it's a bit of a buff just over on the left here, and then pretty continuous through to the Toilet Bowl Rapid we just saw before. So just putting into practice, when we went on the Motu River, this is one of the grade 4 rapids on the Motu or the Motu River. I mangle that. Michael Ramsbottom's offered to do a pronunciation session at the Reefton meet, mainly because of my mangling of words. But this is the Motu, and this is the upper staircase rapid. You can see that when it's much higher flow, it's a massive boulder garden that's grade 4. So everyone's getting out to have a talk about it. Chris and Matt are talking about the lines that they see through the rapid. So I'll just play this, and maybe people can just put up any comments about what would worry them with this rapid or anything they see with this rapid. Just a bit of slow-mo here. You can see this initial drop isn't too bad into this hole at the top, but it is a place where you could stuff up and end up swimming. Pretty straightforward line down the middle, another little stopper there, another downstream V into those rocks. So does anyone see anything that concerns them in the video so far in terms of making a decision now whether we would run that rapid or not? Just pop comments in the chat there. Yeah, these trees on the side worry me. Yeah, would. Pretty bumpy if you swim. There's some good rocks to connect with, and this video is kind of underplays the force of that water and the steepness of this rapid. It looks quite mild. The other thing is that we can't see the very bottom of the rapid. So we've got all this wood that's recently come down. We've probably got some sharp rocks in there to rip pack rafts apart. So let's have a look at what was at the bottom of this rapid. So that's the state of the bottom of the rapid. So what sort of hazards can we see in that one? So I'm seeing a big piece of wood sticking out the side that goes under this undercut rock here. I'm seeing quite a big hole in the top middle of the picture with some wood below it. So, you know, if you came out and you ended up getting pushed towards this rock with its undercut, you might be worried about that piece of wood over there. You're landing on some pretty nasty rocks if you go over this. And then there is actually some wood hidden in this undercut under the rock. So there's no buffer wave. And there's quite a lot of water going through. So, you know, things we look for: buffer waves or no buffer waves, logs, wood's undercut, and the rock in the chute. So in the background was the chute that was possible to run. I elected not to run it because when you look at it, it was a pretty average rapid in terms of the piece that you could run without risk. And then you could make a line on the left. And so you can see a chute in the top right corner here. So it's quite a nice run out through there, but you had to make the run across the top left of the image, the video here. So if you made that run across, that was all fine. But if you were swimming it, it was really not a nice place to be swimming. So it's a case of going, well, it's a bit of an average run in terms of the fun, average fun rapid compared to what we'd been through. Low risk of coming out because the rapid wasn't that gnarly above it, but really high consequence if you did come out. So I think that's the thing to look at here in terms of weighing up just the fun versus the risk. So Megan's favorite time is mnemonic time. So what's our scouting mnemonic and what does each letter stand for? Just pop it in the chat. Yep, worms. So what's the W stand for? It's our water. Yep. So that's what's the water doing. What does O stand for? Like this obstacle that we have here, this submerged rock in the middle of the picture ahead of, I'm not sure who that is paddling. Is that Chris paddling? Chris Coots? Obstacles. So the obstacles to avoid. Then the R is for our route and what path we want to take down through the rapid. Then M is for our markers. So the markers that we're going to identify as we go through the rapid. And then S on the end of our worms is for safety. Oh, it's Dan in his Valkyrie. So he's going to ace the line through here. So a little nasty in the middle of that rapid there, and really sharp rocks on the Motu. If I keep saying it, I'll show you my repair to my boat next time I paddle with you. So there it is. Obstacles, what are the features and problems and how would we avoid them? The route, what is the line? Think about the line you're going to take, and then think about if I came out at any particular point, what is the line you're going to take swimming? What are the eddies that you would target if you were swimming this rapid? What would you do in terms of your gear if this is a grade 4 rapid we're looking down? Would you hang on to your gear, or would you just hammer for this eddy over here, or this eddy here, or this eddy here? You think through all of those sorts of things as you approach it. In terms of the markers, it's like we come through and we take this drop, and then what are our markers for the next line to line us up to go through this drop? And then the markers that we'll see, like, are we lining up when we come out of that drop for this rock in the middle left? And we think about all those markers. Getting out and crouching right down low beside the river and having a look at how it will appear from the river can be fun. Or you can just swim right through the middle of the rapid and see it at eye level. I have a great video of me swimming the Motu slot because I spent too much time looking for one of my markers and not looking at a little rock ahead of me. And then safety, again, what's the fun to risk ratio, and is safety needed, and where would we put our safety? So when we come to the meet, a lot of our paddlers won't have the intuition that the Kaiarahi have developed in terms of just, knowing what the features are and what they are. And so just using that mnemonic can help people give a little bit of a structure to a conversation, and really useful when you're shore scouting and you gather people around and just look about it. So I don't know if people have read the Malcolm Gladwell book Blink, but when we are boat scouting, we've kind of defined a level of skill where we subconsciously blink the whole worms process as we paddle into a rapid. So, Bill is literally boat scouting and blinking grade 3 stuff as we head into it, as quite a few of you will have seen on the Mohaka recently. So does anyone have any sort of tips on how they approach scouting a rapid? If they were Brendan and Nicole, Megan and Marie sitting here above a rapid talking about scouting, any tips on how you go about a rapid? Like Sandra talked about doing it from bottom to top. Does anyone else have any suggestions? You prefer eddy to eddy, or? Hugh Miles says, don't scout too long. I'm not sure what you mean, Hugh, if you want to just expand on that. Bottom to top if possible, from Wild Kiwi. Yeah, Megan has highlighted that thing about just ask everyone what they see and don't spoon feed it. So, the idea is just to facilitate conversations, not to go and say, this is the line you must take through this rapid. We want to go there and we want to just ask people what there is to do. Tom Waters says, consider alternative lines. So I'm going to go into that in quite a bit of detail in a moment. Get perspective from different viewpoints. That's right from Chris, like on the Motu, we'd often go down different banks and scout stuff just to get 2 different angles on things. sort of discuss with everyone beforehand from Kelvin what your threshold is for getting out and shore scouting. And Hugh saying talk about the line and not the hazards. So focus on the positive features and making those runs. So as we said before, and Megan highlighted, it's about tell, show, do. So it's like tell people our process of how we analyze a rapid. I think this is Megan Setti taking people through Matakitaki rapid. Matuki rapid. I think Wanaka got all the A's, so it's the Matuki. Just discussing that rapid and getting the group to talk about what lines they'd like to run on that, and then maybe getting a volunteer to lead the conversation on it and sort of prompting from the more experienced people. So the aim is to enable people rather than to guide them and say this is the line you must take. So Hugh's got another comment: discuss your line, identify the hardest part of the rapid and your contingency, so you don't need to make it up on the fly. I think that's really good. I think also what I've seen quite a bit of in higher grade stuff is people very focused on that Hugh's just stated, but they haven't also done that for their swim. So if you're paddling something that would be a nasty swim, think about what your contingency options are on your swim as well. Think about whether you ditch your gear or you'd hang on to your gear. Is the gear protection from rocks or is it an impediment? So we've got some quite good videos there of team failures on the Hutt Gorge that highlight some of those things. Chris talking about where to set up safety, and Kelvin and Kelly also emphasized this on another occasion, breaking the rapid down into bite-sized pieces and doing it eddy to eddy. So this is one thing I think that's just really useful. And like a lot of these things, you can teach people a hell of a lot of stuff on the river by just telling them a scenario and not doing any teaching or anything at all. Just have them challenge themselves to say, what would I do in that situation? And their realization will be, shit, I didn't have the gear to do that. I should take a spare paddle. I haven't done a course. I should go and do a course. So all that sort of stuff. So one of my favorite ones when I take people down the Hutt Gorge for the first time is to talk about this 6 meter drop on the Hutt Gorge that doesn't exist. And when you see a horizon line, you can sort of talk to people about what's ahead and whether they can, how they would go about scouting a horizon line. So just stop when you see a horizon line, tell them it's the fake falls and that there's a drop, and ask, what are you going to do? And then, the key thing is that they're going to identify a safe eddy above that horizon line and get out and shore scout it. So, the only acceptable answer is to shore scout it in that kind of scenario. You don't need to guide them through what a line is on something like that. It's just a case of saying, when you see a horizon line, if you can't see the bottom of that rapid, don't go near it. You don't enter anything that you haven't seen the bottom of. Again, this is a video of Sandra Hislop, who's like a grade 5 kayaker, but also pack rafts a lot with Barney. And I've posted that, so I won't play it because it's really noisy because it's next to the rapid, but it's a really good breakdown that she did for a group of Tararua pack rafters, just explaining worms in great detail. And there's a lot of good little snippets of insight from her on that. So the other suggestion came earlier from Tom Waters. Look at different lines that people could run on these rapids. On the meets, we are doing, grade 2 mostly. And for the more experienced paddlers, that may be the onset of boredom for them. And so I encourage people to take harder lines. And I think this rapid here resulted in a swim on the day. And Hugh Miles did an amazing rescue of Brendan, I think, on that rock just there. It kind of highlights that even very experienced paddlers are out there, looking after each other and obeying all those group paddling rules that we talked about with Kelvin last call. And just saying here, wall rapids give learners a lot of trouble. So breaking down and scouting a wall rapid and talking about the lines is quite useful. I think I saw a picture of our favorite little wall rapid when the Wellington Tramping Club did a course with Hugh Miles recently. The rapid we call the Black Birch Swing Rapid. So there's a swing above it and quite nice just to catch a micro eddy and then ferry glide across the face of the wall on that rapid. But this is the other one that Hugh ran a course on here. This is called the Maori Bank Rapid. And it can be quite a grunty rapid at high flow. And what I wanted to do here was just sort of highlight the opportunity to explore different lines with people. So this is probably about 4 minutes long, this video. And I just remind you, if we drop out because of our time limit, you can just log straight back in. So I'll just run this video. So sorry about the graphics, but black is the shore, 1 is an eddy, this is a downstream V, this is an eddy, number 2, a stopper, and a wave train, and a third eddy. So those are the features that we're looking at, and every Wednesday night we go out and run a paddle down that. So here's Ben just swimming through it with his feet up, keeping out of trouble, probably not as mindful of that rock as he should be, through the stopper, and then he's got an eddy on either side of him there and a failed throw bag from someone. So the most common thing that we see is the bomber on our meets. So this is a boat, awesome graphics, but you know, this is someone who hasn't done a pack rafting course. So you can see they haven't done a pack rafting course because no one's told them to put paddle in the water. So sorry, Bob, if you see this, but that's the paddle like fuck paddler. And then that's someone who's done a course and he's a bit more assertive about his paddling. He's just fresh off a course. And this is Amy. She did a course with Arno a few years back. So she's kind of understands what the water's going to do to her boat a bit more and reasonably assertive, but you know, doesn't go into the eddies or anything like that. So those are the sorts of things where we can start to say, what about approaching this rapid in the way that AJ does here, where he ferry glides across to have a look at the rapid, and then he chooses a line that keeps him away from that stopper and maybe takes him into an eddy or not. This is a man in a bicycle helmet, unfortunately, but it was the first time he'd shown up and we didn't notice the helmet. He came back with a proper helmet the next week. He's a really good kayaker from his youth, kayaked a lot in Canterbury. And so you see lots of draw strokes in his paddling arsenal. So here's another way to tackle this rapid. Just pop any quotes. Oh, Amy says she did a course with you. Pop any comments on this in the chat, eh? So here he is, AJ ferry gliding across that rapid. So that's another way to introduce some challenge for people who are, you know, running the Anangahua and it's only mild grade 2 and they're getting a little bit bored. Offer them that challenge. Or what about catching this micro eddy at 1 here? So coming across, the boat coming in, catching the eddy, and then using the features like this little lateral to surf back across the river. So here's Steve coming in, little eddy into that micro eddy there, and then he's going to come out and just use that little lateral up there to help him surf across and just deflect off that stopper into the other eddy. And then this next one is just a demonstration of, again, on a rapid where people are just tending to bomb down the middle, and we see a lot of this on meetups. So there's Pete bombing straight down the middle of the wave train and then coming into that eddy. In contrast, someone using cross-current momentum is just going to use the river to push them into the eddy more directly so that it's not such an abrupt turn. So there he is just demonstrating that line, which is a much easier line because he's used the cross-current. And then stepping it up again, this is Tony just ferry gliding, catches an eddy at the top, and just looking across to see what features are there. He should probably be looking over his shoulder a bit more and just seeing what's there before he turns and runs across the rapid. So the key message in this stuff is if you are, Matthew, see a psychologist about seeing human anatomy in the diagrams. That's a real worry. The thing to note here is just that, that's a rapid that is over in 20 seconds for everyone. But if you take that rapid apart and you weren't as well, Chris, take the rapids apart and just suggest to people, hey, what other lines can you see in that rapid and what other ways have you got of tackling it? And I think that'll help people get a little bit more out of what they do. The next one is just, stepping it up. I think this is Maori Gully, this one. And this was a course I did with Kelly, a grade 3 course. So it's kind of top end to grade 2, bottom end to grade 3. And the message from Kelly was like, hey, Martin, you're playing around on grade 2, why aren't you playing around on grade 3? And I think in doing that course, I think that was really the main thing I got out of it, was her just going, take more risks with your paddling and challenge yourself to make a lot more of the eddies and that in the grade 3 stuff. So I came away from that weekend not necessarily having learned a whole lot of different paddling things, but just with a different paradigm in terms of how I was going to paddle in grade 3. It allowed me to go away and practice my own stuff, work on some of the stuff she'd taught me, like surfing across holes, and just become a better paddler. So we can encourage people to do that. We want people to go and do courses and get upskilled, but there is stuff that we can just encourage them to do. So paddling grade 2 like it's grade 3. So things you can do is just ask people, where's the last safe eddy that boats can fit into? How many zigzags can you fit into this rapid? Can you ferry glide this rapid? And just make it competitive and challenging. We talked about in the group paddling using that rolling eddy thing, the rolling eddy game, to improve people's eddying skills. So it's the same thing here. How many zigzags can you fit in? If that left-hand side of the river had a log, what's the line you'd be taking over there, and can you get across to it? Those types of things. Does anyone else have any? I mean, Kelvin talked last week about, setting a challenge for a micro eddy, like we're not going to continue on through this next harder part of the river until everyone's demonstrated they can catch that eddy over there, and getting people to just workshop catching eddies for a little bit. Anyone got any sort of suggestions like that they could roll out at a meet? Yeah, and Kelvin says when scouting, a typical question you get asked is, should I paddle it? And if asked, what your response is. So if you've got an answer for Kelvin, just type that in there. Yep, Hugh says that's not my decision. Hugh Cannard's previously said it looks like a rapid where I wouldn't be able to risk rescuing you, as opposed to saying, you'll be fine. You say, I couldn't rescue you if you paddled it, or I couldn't put myself at risk to paddle that. Ask them if they'd be happy to swim it. I think that's one we use quite often. Ask, be quite specific and say, how would you deal with that big rock over there to avoid it breaking your leg when you swim? And really highlight the risks of the rapid, perhaps. So with all the stuff, there's no correct answer. It's just kind of, the thing is that Kaiarahi are mentors. They're just there on the river to set a good example. You're not there to lead people or tell them what they should be doing. So, that's the key takeaway here, is do not put yourself in the position where you feel responsible for the people in your group. Everyone in the group is responsible for everyone else. So that's short and sharp, and we're about 3 minutes from out of time. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions or anything they want to pop in the chat there. Any ideas that you think you could employ at the next meetup you go to as a Kaiarahi, or anything that you could do to help a Kaiarahi if you're one of the people who are just here to observe? Yeah, Kelvin says scouting is a great learning opportunity, and I think it really is a good good learning opportunity. And I've talked before about the time that we had a really nasty grade 3 rapid with lots of hazards, and Vian came over and sort of said, what am I looking at here? You know, what is it that is making you say that we should all walk this rapid? And just helping people to recognize the features and to plan it all out for themselves. You know, everything comes with experience, and we're just giving them some tools to help them remember the steps to go through. You know, where's the water flowing? What are the obstacles? What's the best route that we can take? What are the markers, and what's the safety? So Hugh says reflection on your scout and your plan is massive. Experience plus reflection is what learning is. Without reflection, you don't learn. And we talked about that last week. Megan Setti talked about the fact at the end of a paddle or at the end of a rapid, sort of stop, take time, take stock of what happened in the rapid, and just talk about what the learnings are. So there's Megan repeating that. I think people should be willing to scout more often, even things you don't need to scout. So much learning is lost. Yeah, and that's, I think, what we want to do with the Kaiarahi at the events. So we want to stop and scout stuff that you wouldn't necessarily need to stop and scout. You just want to stop and familiarize people with that process. Chris says, wrap up a scouting session, get everyone's commitment on a run or no run, so everyone is aware of who's paddling and who's walking. Like a classic example of that was when we ran the Rangatiki, and we had that that first big rapid. I can't remember the name of it now. It's probably called The Shoot or something adventurous. But, you know, I went down and put safety on one side, and people assumed that I'd walked the rapid. So I came back up and ran it and found no safety at the bottom of a, you know, a healthy 3+ rapid. And I was a bit grumpy about that on the day. So yeah, clear communication and just not getting caught up in the excitement of running that stuff. But that's probably above our grade for the meets, right? The meets are about getting people to have the discipline to look at doing the worms thing and recognizing that, you know, it's not just what route am I going to take, it's where am I going to set safety. And what I love when Sandra did her talk was she talked about how if you're going to watch people run the rapid to decide whether it's okay for you to run the rapid, go and stand somewhere useful with a throw rope. You know, don't be sort of standing at the top with your throw rope back at your boat when a problem arises and your help is needed. So really recommend, if people haven't watched the video of Sandra, you do that. It was just such a good session we had. We had about 20 people went through the Hutt Gorge, and apart from Tim playing with some rocks on double drop, we had a really good run, and people learned a hell of a lot on that. And her advice in that little video is well worth watching. The sound is pretty horrid, but I put subtitles on it, so I took the time to do that because it's a really good demo of talking a group of newbies through worms.
Yeah, I just had a point on scouting. I think one of the reasons that people don't scout is when at the end of the day, when they've got time pressure, as someone mentioned before, when you're worried about getting into camp, so you've got those other safety factors, and it's just really tempting to just boat scout everything. And the other one is that if it looks like a nasty portage, people tend to be a bit more keen to paddle it if it looks like it's going to be really hard work carrying your boat full of gear around it. So I guess like a thing being just being aware of why you're making the decision to run it. Is that based on the actual safety of the water, or is that based on the fact that you don't want to carry a boat?
Yeah, we had one, there's one really fresh slip on the Motu that was actually almost as dangerous to portage, because as we moved across the slip was continuing to collapse because we were the first creatures to cross it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there needs to be a bit more care on trips about people who are portaging and the help they need, particularly when they're feeling insecure, and not everyone is happy traversing screes. watching people travel with a boat. I think we need to do a lot more care there on trips generally.
Yeah. I think one really cool thing that we did on the Hutt Gorge, I'm pretty sure you were there because I remember you going through that log, was we did that little exercise on the Hutt River on a Wednesday night session where we came up to a bluff and we climbed out of our boats and climbed up the cliff face, dragged our boats up over, dropped them the other side and got back in our boats. And there was kind of a little bit of, what use would that be? And then we went down the Hutt Gorge and there was a great big new log there that meant we had to do exactly that exercise to, in quite tricky circumstances to avoid a real safety hazard. So just doing little fun activities like that when you're out and about is worth thinking about,
One thing that comes to my mind personally is also how I'm feeling. And it's something that I talked about at the Wanaka meet, because often at the meetups, obviously they're multi-day events, and how you're feeling on the first day, you're probably a lot fresher, you've got more energy, but typically people don't sleep that well. They're in dorm rooms. So come day 2, especially day 3, people are a lot more tired and fatigued. So I think it's often quite a good thing to just check with yourself how you're feeling on a particular day. Sometimes I'll say I'll paddle a rapid one day, but I wouldn't the next because of energy levels. So that's just something to think about as well. It's not, that paddler's going to paddle that rapid because they're good enough, and that one isn't because they're not good enough. There's so many factors when you're scouting and looking and making that decision. So including the team that you're with as well and the people that you're with. If you want to set an example at a meetup as well, that, you don't have to paddle every rapid every day.
Yeah.
So that's from me.
Yeah, I think Sarah and David identified a couple of rapids on the Matuki, and they kind of recommended that people scout those, and everyone got out and in groups, and that's that photo of Megan with her group going through the scouting of that rapid. And I think at the meet, that's maybe something for Tom to just note down, to just identify a couple of interesting rapids that exercise could be done on, because if you've got 40 people running a river, you're going to end up with a bit of traffic congestion, and you need a little bit of planning around where those scout rapids might be. But it's definitely worth doing a boulder garden and definitely worth doing a wall rapid, just so that people get the idea of what you're looking at. So, someone said that they would just let Vian do that grade 3 that had the siphon and the logs. So that, he's a good kayaker and a good outdoors person, but he didn't understand how you would scout a rapid. He had his way of doing it, but he was like full of inquiry as to, okay, why are we not doing this one? What is it that you see that I can't see? And I think that's the wisdom that we can pass on to other people. One of the really positive things on this meetup is that, almost 60% of the people that have signed up so far have said that they are prepared to lead. So, at previous meets, we've had 85 people and a dozen people prepared to lead. And now we're, as a community, grown to the point where sort of half of our group feel like they can lead to the level that those 12 people led 2 or 3 years ago. So that's a fantastic thing. And I think this Kaiarahi thing just gives us the opportunity to share skills. And it doesn't have to be sharing skills. It can be subtly exposing knowledge gaps. So, if Jenny Cozzy was victim to having to lend someone a paddle the other day because she had the only spare paddle in a group of about 20 people. So, lessons like that are shared through anecdotes on the river. You can all talk about the time, who was it lost their paddle? Bernard lost his paddle and Jenny had to lend him a paddle, and that provides an opportunity just to talk about, hey, have spare kit with you. So, that's what the Kaiarahi thing is. It's not about coaching people and teaching people and giving them a list of what they must have with them. It's just about passing on knowledge and sharing knowledge. There's a lot of people in the community with a lot of experience. People have come back to it from kayaking and are fantastic paddlers. And if you're a Kaiarahi and you're an average paddler, and most of us are compared to kayakers, you can just point to those people and say, watch how they do this. You don't have to be demoing stuff yourself. You just, we're pointing to the Toms and the Kellys and the Bills, and saying, look at how they do those strokes and imitate that. So I've said it lots of times. Hugh Cannard told me to just sit on Bill's tail at the Queenstown meet, and that's what I did, and I learned a lot from doing that. Anyone else? Megan Setti, you're never short for sage advice. What about any words? Other than it's getting late and we should probably
just trying to get my mute off. The only thing I would say is that scouting should be by the lowest common denominator. So sort of talk about this in tramping, that you're only as fast as your slowest person, and you can only really paddle. As a group, you can only move at the comfort level of the person who's like the least skilled and comfortable. And if one person says they want to scout, then that's it. The group stops, because absolutely. That means that person definitively has identified they need to scout. And I think that's something sometimes as groups, we have a discussion about whether or not to scout. And I think someone
Do you want to talk about what happened on the Mohaka when Bill boat scouted a grade 3 plus?
Sure, I can be brief. There was a grade 3 rapid that Martin had told us as a group that we would all be pulling over to scout collectively as a whole group. And we were the front group, and I was the only person who had a GPS on us with the rapids actually marked. So our group either had people who'd never been down the river, or in Bill's case, he couldn't remember where the actual rapid was. So, and Bill unfortunately happened to be at the front, can't remember things. So he didn't identify the rapid that we were meant to scout. And I was back a ways and was picking it up on the GPS, trying to be like, oh, I think this is it. I think this is it. And so Bill ended up running it with 2 other punters, and the 3 of us managed to pull over and scout. And part of the reason we also made a point of doing that is because we knew everyone else was depending on us to identify where that rapid was to scout. But sometimes I guess you all need to pay attention as a group.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that Bill's capability in a boat means that if it's grade 4, he's going to be a little bit stressed about whether he can boat scout his way past a hazard. And so he's coming around the corner on a grade 3, and it looks absolutely fine just to sail on down through it. And so off he goes, and people follow him. And, I think we had a swim because that's his capability. And in that moment, we'd been boat scouting a lot of stuff. And it just, it just highlights that danger of getting very comfortable with your own paddling capability as Kaiarahi and charging people through something that's above their comfort zone, and then having them, swim and not have a good day because they're not comfortable swimming in water of that intensity. Not that happened on the Mohaka. It's just a good example of how easily it can happen. And, there was a log at the bottom of that rapid. It was in a non-hazardous location, but no one knew that as they went around that corner. Yeah. So it's just, kind of highlights the coming right back to the start to sum the whole thing up. Armchair scouting, we knew that the Dogleg Rapid was one of the bigger rapids. Google scouting, we knew where it was and we'd marked a pin into our phones. Shore scouting, we went and had a look at it and discovered it had a log at the bottom, but it wasn't hazardous and we wouldn't have seen that boat scouting. And then we had a really good discussion about what different lines we could take on that rapid and how we could use cross-current momentum on that rapid to avoid going through a couple of really nasty holes. So I think that's probably a wrap at that point in terms of that was a good learning from the Mohaka event. And thanks everyone for dialing in, and hope to see you at Reefton and on that Swift Water course. So really make the most of that opportunity for the Swift Water course, not just because it's a cheap Swift Water course, but because of the camaraderie and the connection that you can make with other Kaiarahi on that to help grow the community and grow the sort of team spirit in that community. Okay, thanks everyone. Catch up.
Cheers, Martin.
Cheers.